When you create a project or you open a new project, this is how it should look. I just created a new project for the sake of this tutorial. You can have this layout any way you want, but I'm gonna go ahead and use the layout. I'm using the UE4 Classic layout just to make it easy, but you can use any layout you want. If you wanted my same layout, that's the one I'm using. Basically, if you have a brand new project, well, actually you'll have a player 2 spawner, but I deleted mine. I had started recording before and my video got deleted, so it's still gone, but that's okay, we don't need it. We'll just start here. So if you wanted to delete a spawner, you can come over here and you can right click and delete. So edit, delete. And if you made a mistake, you can go to edit, undo, delete elements, because we don't want to delete that. Also, you can just click on it and delete it as well, and then just do delete. We're going to use the outliner and verse explorer and our content drawer a lot, as well as maybe the output log. The output log is really useful for debugging, so don't ignore it. It's handy. Comes in handy. But for now, content drawer is really important. So the content drawer is one of the more important elements. So all is all your project, or not all of your project, anything within your project. So I named my project tutorial. So anything specific to my project is going to be in tutorial content. However, Fortnite and Epic are also available to this project. So these are specific to this project. Every project will be self-contained basically, but these are here to use as well. So Fortnite will use this a lot. So if you've ever played Creative 1.0, these are very similar. So I'm just going to pull up Creative 1.0 to show you what I'm talking about. So if you go up here to launch session, and then you want to check your settings, you could live edit, auto start game. You don't have to. You can pick what's easiest for you. You can launch to your PC. And if you have a really slow PC, you can also connect a platform. So like if you have an Xbox or PlayStation, this comes in really handy if you have a really slow laptop, because that'll save your life down there. But for now, I'm just going to launch to the PC. I'm going to launch session.
20 minutes later.
What it does is it pulls open a Fortnite game so you can play your game. Now, obviously, our game here is pretty boring. There's nothing here, but what it does is show us what we have so far. And the reason I really wanted to open this and show you is if you go to Creative 1.0, you can hit your, oh, well, first we got to exit the game. So you'll want to end game if you have a game running. So you'll hit end game. And then when you hit end game, you should recognize this if you've played Creative 1.0. So basically, you can also use this Creative 1.0 within UEFN. And I wanted to bring this up to show you that this, when you go to tab and you go to, your prefabs, your props, your terrain, all of this stuff here is like this content folder here. So when I do content drawer, it's a mirror of all this. So this here is like Creative 1.0 stuff, but it's in UEFN. So for example, I can go down here and I can pick a button. I can search for a button here and I can place it here like this, for example, or just like old Creative 1.0, you can do it here as well. So button, I gotta spell it right, button, and then here, I'm gonna do place now, and do it this way as well. So let's see, pull. So the old way, you can pull it towards you. There we go. Okay. So as you see, I added one button using UEFN and one button added using Creative 1.0. But there's kind of a caveat to this. Sometimes it'll glitch if you do stuff like this, but I'm just doing it for the sake of the tutorial. You kind of want to keep it consistent. But the way you save it when you do something like this, I'm just going to minimize this. Let's just see if it'll let me push changes. So it might not save both buttons having done it through UEFN and through Creative 1.0, but just the point is that you can do it in both. But when you do it with Creative 1.0 like that, you want to make sure to push it every time because sometimes it glitches. At least it does for me. So if you get a glitch like that, just make sure to always push every new change. It's actually a really good practice with UEFN too because sometimes if you add a bunch of things and it freezes on you, you'll lose all your work. So when you add something, make sure to save and push to verse because that'll save you. Nothing's more frustrating than doing a whole ton of work and then it all freezes or it gets lost. So I've learned that the hard way a few times. Look, it did save them both. Yay! So right now there's a game and both buttons are in here. And they don't do anything, they're just there hanging out. But I just wanted to show that this is just like Creative 1.0 and to a certain extent you can do Creative 1.0 in verse and that they're kind of matched together. So if it's easier for you to find things here, you can do it here. Just make sure to save often. But I'm going to do them through the lens of verse. But if you're not sure, just it's a good idea to look through Creative 1.0 to get a good feel for what's going on. So just remember that this content drawer here is basically just a mirror of... Oh, and then island settings, I'll just, while I'm here, if it doesn't freeze on me. So island settings, oh, sorry. This island settings here is the same as this island settings here. So that's another thing to note. So basically a lot of stuff you could do in 1.0 except obviously the code part. But I just wanted to point those out before we started. Okay, so now that we got 2 buttons here, I think we should have 3. So why don't we do 3 buttons? There's an easy way to get a 3rd button. We can go here and the buttons we already have will be on our outliner. So for example, button 1, button 2, we can go to button 2 or any button really. We can go to copy and then we can paste and get a 3rd button. And if you didn't want to do it that way, you can also go to your content drawer and go to devices and search for button in your devices here and then drag it. So like drag it, say you want a 4th button and it'll pop up here in your editor. So since these buttons are a hectic mess, well, first let's save them. How about if we do? So we can do push changes, and as you'll see, the buttons that we just added will pop up, and you can, green here shows that they're added. If they're red here, that shows they're deleted, so save selected. Like that. So why don't we, since these buttons are kind of chaotic, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger like this, just so that we have more space to edit here. So, one thing that I really like about Verse that doesn't exist in Creative, you know how in Creative your character has to drag everything to where you want it, pushing and pulling and just doing things the hard way? Well, here, when you click on a device, or any prop actually, but anything you want to click on, what's really cool is you can use the coordinates here. So for example, when I click on button, down here under transform, it has our location. So this is where our button exists in space. So location will be X, Y, and Z. Rotation will be, of course, which direction it is in. So this is our Z direction here. So you can rotate it, the scale, you can make it bigger. So for example, if we wanted a bigger button, you can make it bigger by like, not sure if you can, yeah, see, you can make it bigger, see, in X, Y, and Z directions. So I think that was Z, yeah. So you can make it bigger. So we want a big button. Can move it around. When we move it around, it'll show. If you look down here when you're moving this around, see, it'll show you where you are in X, Y, and Z. So rotation is similar. Say we can change the degrees we want it. So that's really handy if you're trying to put something against a wall. You can rotate the degrees. For button 3, we can do it as well. We could do 0, I don't know, 300, 100, and then angle, what was it, 180, and 2, oops, 2, and then 2, where did it go? Yeah, there it goes, okay. Or no, let's make that one 200 so that's next to the others, there we go. And then for button 4, same thing, 0, 300, 100, what is it, 180, or was it 90? I don't remember, 90. And then 2, 2, 2. No, it was, yeah, okay. So that's one thing I love about UEFN, because in regular Creative 1.0, it's going to take you forever to get them this nice. And especially, this is especially useful if you want to ever get into moving or teleporting things. You can figure out its location, and this can help you make vectors. It's really useful to just kind of keep aware of these. That's why I kind of showed it there. So that's the first step. We're also going to want, for this tutorial, we're also going to want a billboard. So we're going to come back to our content drawer and search billboard. And then we can bring it up here. And I don't know, let's make the angle hopefully facing the person. Okay. Maybe make it up a little. Make this more even, I guess. Minus, what is it? 100? No, minus 200. That's fine. 50. Okay, so we want a billboard and a couple buttons for this tutorial. Alright, so now that we got our devices. Oh, I never ended the last game. Oops. Now that we got our devices, we should be able to push changes. And it's gonna show all of our devices here. We're gonna do save selected. And when we push changes, if we have a session loaded like this, it should show up in our game. So I'll click on our Fortnite here.
20 minutes later.
Okay, and then when Fortnite finally launches, you won't see the billboard because it's on clear and it's not set up to do anything yet. You should see our buttons. They'll say interact. Obviously, they don't do anything. They're just here, existing, minding their own business. You'll see our spawner here, just in our exciting game here of our creative grid game. And then end game. And then when you end game here, of course, it's like our creative 1.0 view here. And of course, obviously, if you do something here, like if I delete this, I'm gonna delete button 4, it's gone. And when I go back to here, see it's gone here too. And I can, well, it's not showing push changes, but it should show push changes when you make a change, but sometimes it kind of glitches. You just gotta be careful about that. I'll just exit in entirety and see if it lets me push the changes. Sometimes that works. Okay, so I exited. Let's see if it lets me. It should let me click on verse, but sometimes it's a little glitchy, so. Okay, so I went ahead and saved verse code. It froze on me, so I had to start this back up. But anyhow, so right now our project's not that big, so it doesn't matter a whole lot. But one really helpful thing to do is to make folders here. So if you want to make folders, so for example, I like to make a devices folder, so you'll right click and you'll do create folder and name it whatever. Devices is a good one for me. I like that. You can also do like create folder and make a background, so maybe background, like props and things in your background. You don't have to, but it just makes life easy. And then to move our devices into our folder, we can click on them. And you can do control and click on multiple ones like this. Let's see, island settings is a device. Level bounds, although it's kind of a device, you don't do anything with it. So click on, I guess just click on your devices, move to devices. All right, then you can like condense it. And our grid planes, these are these grids on our ground here. You see when you click on these. Level bounds, although it's technically a device, and world data layers, those are technically devices, but we never do anything with them, so stick those in the background. And background folder, edit, move to background. There we go. And let's see, I think, did I? This, I'm just gonna move to the background too, because that's kind of, we don't do anything with that, so I'm just gonna move it to the background just so it's out of the way. Out of sight, out of mind. Okay, so like for devices, these are devices we use. And let's say you have a lot of a device, so maybe you make Sudoku and you have like 81 buttons and you don't want them all under the same folder. You can also make subfolders. You could do create folder, buttons, and you can further like, oh no, I made it in the wrong spot. Okay, delete that. Move to or move it to devices. There we go. Okay. So now, oh man, what the heck? Okay. So for buttons, you can click on your buttons and move those into the folder. Okay. For this little project, this is overkill, but if you get bigger projects, this can be so helpful to help you find stuff. Another quick thing is the search up here. Sometimes in your output log, you'll get errors with crazy huge numbers. Let's see, I don't know if it Yeah, sometimes you'll get errors with numbers, and if you search here, all these devices will also, devices and props could have a number in that output log, so that's where you would search it. You'd copy and paste it, and sometimes you can find the device erroring out that way, but folders also help you find what you're looking for as well. So they're just handy. You don't have to. You can have all your devices here and it's not gonna affect the function of your game at all, so it's just personal taste. Alright, so finally getting started, we're going to open Verse to make our own device. So in our content browser, how Fortnite has all these devices for us to use here, like our accolades and our buttons and all that good jazz. So Fortnite has devices, but now we want to make our own device so we can make things happen on our own here. So in order to create our own device, we want to go to where our outliner is here and go to our Verse Explorer. And on whatever we named our project, I happen to name mine tutorial. We're going to right click and we're going to go add new verse file to project. And then we're going to name it. So why don't we name this game, or how about tutorial game, or tutorial button device. How about that? Okay, then we're going to create it. Now to open this in Verse, we can go and just press Verse here. That'll open our Visual Studio for us. Oh, what just happened? Oh, ignore this. Sometimes your project will show up right away on the screen, and if not, you can click on your Explorer here, and you can click on the one you're working on. You might have multiple devices, so you can click on the one you're working on over here. I'm going to minimize that, doing the same thing. Okay, so now we have this very simple code right here, and basically what it's going to do is print hello world and 2 plus 2. Let's just save it and save that and run Verse. I like to build code. Oh, you know what though? How about before I worry about all that, I show you where it saved it to. So here in our content browser, you can actually see it right here right now, but in our content browser, we can come here and we're going to see we're going to see our, whatever we named our project content, of course, the Fortnite and the Epic folder. So we named this project, I named it tutorial, and you're going to see it created this folder called game device. Creative devices, sorry. It created this folder called creative devices. It just does that automatically, and it puts all the devices that we make in there. So I'm going to double click and you're going to see this is the device we just created. And just like when we do in Fortnite, regular Fortnite, we want to drag our device into the world here. All right, there's our device. It's in the world. And so now that it's in the world, I'm going to build verse code and save it. And now I am going to launch session. Okay, and here we have our Fortnite. It finally loaded our game. As you see, we have the same stuff we had before. Our buttons that don't do anything, our text that's just sitting there. And now our game device. This is that code that we just created. It sits here. Alright, so right now, all we have, nothing's working yet, so all we have is, let me end this game. And now, there's two places you can find the log. You can find it up here. You can this log, it's gonna print, see how our code, it prints hello world and 2 plus 2 equals 4. And that same log could also be found down here on our output log. We could do hello world 2 plus 2 equals 4. So the log will be in both places. Okay, so now that we show that this device is working, let's get down to business with our buttons. I'm just gonna minimize Fortnite here real quick. Well, I'll just click on this. So we're gonna go to our verse code. And so now we have to connect our buttons and our device to our device. And how do we do that? Well, so this is our verse class right here. We created this tutorial button device, and it's inheriting from creative device. And every single one of these will have an on begin in order to run your function. So it's gonna run what's here, but you can also make global variables here in this area. So that's what we're gonna do. We're going to tell it about those other devices. So remember, we have 3 buttons and a billboard. So we want to tell it. And how do we do that? We use the editable tag here. Hopefully I'm spelling that right. Editable, I'm going to be very creative and call it button 1. And then we have the colon here. And then what type is button 1? Well, it's a button device. That's its type. And that's going to be equal to button device. All right. And so in case you're wondering what this is here, that's just what it is called in Fortnite. I think I have it open here. In the documentation, I'm going to leave links to all this. In the documentation, it tells you here. So we know if we use this button device, we need to make sure we have this imported. So we're using Fortnite.com devices, and do we? So let's see if we do. So yes, see, we have our Fortnite.com devices here. And then we want to look here, and we're going to see, if we look at the documentation, it's going to talk about some of its inheritance and what kind of members and data and functions it has. So this is a button, so we do have all these things at our fingertips for this thing. But since this is a button, this is a really important one here. We want our interacted with event. Okay, so how we're going to do this is we also need to interact with this button, right? So we need to tell it about this button, because right now it's just, oh, we can also put var here. So we don't have to in this case because we're not really changing anything, but var means we can change things if we want to. But in this specific case, it's not going to matter much, but we should just put it. Okay, so we need to tell it about this button. So in order to do that, we named it button 1. So we're going to give it button 1. Oh, button 1. And we're going to do interacted with event. And dot subscribe, because it's a data function. So dot subscribe, and then we need to tell it what to do when it's subscribed. So we're going to call this button 1 pressed. And this is going to be a function we write. This button 1 pressed is going to be a function. I don't think I spelled subscribe right though. Subscribe. There we go. Okay, so button 1 dot interacted with the event dot subscribe, button 1 pressed. So this is a function we are going to make. And indentation is weirdly important in this language, which is probably a little confusing because syntax is important too. So it takes the worst of both worlds and puts them together for some reason. like in a language like Python, spacing matters and there's not as much semicolons and brackets and stuff like that. But and in like Java or C++, indentation is mostly just for visual, but here it's both. It's like Python where you want indentations proper, and it's also like Java where you have to have your semicolons on point and everything. So keep that in mind. So we want to make sure to align this properly. So tutorial buttons. Now this is inside this function. So we don't want it inside our function. We want to make our own function that is part of our tutorial buttons class. So we want to put it on the same level as our global variables here so that it's inside this class. So of course, since we already named it, we're going to do button 1. Why don't we make these capital so they look nicer actually? Button, so it's easier to read. How about if we, okay, just so it's easy to, button 1 pressed. That's the name of our function. And this is a button, so it's just something you'll just memorize doing it a bunch, but we're just going to pass in the agent, and that's of type agent. It can just anything you want, really, but it is of type agent. We're going to put our colon here, and we'll just give it type void because it's not going to return anything. It's just going to work with our button. I think I can just put block for now. Well, no, let me just put print fake for now, just to get the errors to go away. We're not going to keep this print here. I'm just going to put it there so that it doesn't give us an error. Okay, so we have our button 1, and we tell it about it in our function, in our start function here. All right, and so now we need 2 more of these buttons since we got 3 buttons. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste, and then I'm just going to creatively call them button 2 and button 3. I know, so super creative and inspirational and different. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to copy these 3. And paste, and I'm going to call this button 1, button 2, and button 3. And then I'm going to call this, of course, button 2 pressed and button 3 pressed. Okay. Let me just comment these out a second because it'll be easier to finish these in a certain order. So now we just have to worry about our Billboard device. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add editable var. We're going to be really creative and call it Billboard 1. And that is a Billboard device. And I also pulled up the documentation, and I'll leave links in my code. But button device, let's see, Billboard. Oh, see if it's, is it? Okay, well, I don't know why it's kind of freezing over there, but I will leave the link in the code and just trust me on this. So it's going to be Billboard device Most of these, not every single one of them, are named pretty obvious. You can almost guess. But some of them are kind of odd, so it's always good to just check if you're not sure. It's not a big deal to check. Okay, so billboard device like this. All right, so now we have our 3 buttons on our billboard. And so I'm just going to save this really quick because I want to show you. Save. And then we're going to build verse code again. First, build verse code. Sweet. All right, and now we're going to go to our button device here in our outliner here and check something out. Now check this out. Now in our button device, look, it gives us options here. See how it gives us these options? We just created button 1, button 2, button 3, and billboard 1. Look at that. So now I just want to make this a point and show you, if you leave it as is and you run the session and you push these changes just without entering anything here, it doesn't know your stuff exists. So what we want to do is we want to hook up our button. Now you might have renamed these, you might have done other things with them. These might be called something, it doesn't really matter. So we can name these things whatever we want, but it's easier just to match them just for later when you come look at your code, you'll know what's going on. But really this button could have been named Jebediah Noah swimming clicker or something, and you can still put it in button 1. Or you could have named this abracadabra, but as long as it's a button device and this is a button device, they'll work together. And notice how it only gives us devices that are proper for it. Does that ever come up? Okay, so yeah, so here is a good, okay, so as you see, it doesn't do anything. Well, we didn't write any code for it to do anything, but it's not hooked up yet, so I'm just going to end this game there. Okay, so now we're going to hook these up. So you got button 1, we're going to put that here. Button 2, we're going to put that here. Button 3, we're going to put that here. And look, it knows what type they are. It'll only allow you to enter the same types here, which is really handy. But sometimes, like when I created Sudoku, I had like 81 buttons here, and I had to carefully make sure every button went to its proper place because it was really important for the way the game worked. So just make sure when you have something important and complicated, you name them so you remember how to hook them up, right? So I'm going to build verse code, save selected, and I'm going to, well, no, it's fine. I'll just push changes again. So every time you do something, you really want to build your verse code. You don't necessarily have to run it every time, like in this case, and check it. Another good method, you could always exit session and just keep pushing changes without running Fortnite, but just for the sake of showing what's going on, it's easy. Like until you're used to what's going on, or you want to just check what's going on, it's good to pull up Fortnite regularly to make sure it's doing what you hope it's going to do. So while that's doing that, all right, so now we got our buttons and billboard hooked up, but we still haven't done anything with them. We just kind of made some code here. So now, well, there is one thing it will do. This button 1 here that we have, when you press it, it's already subscribed, so it will print this. So let's see. Actually, let's go back to Fortnite. And if I didn't exit the game, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so look, when I press, I'm going to press this button 1. Going to interact. And did you see on the corner of the screen how it prints fake for now, fake for now? See it? Okay. So it's showing our button is working. And remember, that's on the log, so let me just end this game real quick. So remember, that's also going to be in the log whenever you have a print statement. So this output log, see how it printed that. And also in our log here as well. Just so it's in all of our logs. How handy is that? So we can check them wherever feels best. So I'm just going to click on this again. All right. So button 1 is hooked up properly, but we need to keep going here. We want it to do something more interesting than just printing that. So now we're going to need another variable, and this variable is going to be just Billboard text. So in the documentation, I think, I'm not sure this is in the documentation. I just learned it from watching another coder. But basically what you're going to need is you're going to have to change a string to a message. So a string is a type, and a message is a type, just like an int and a float, and all those are types. So a string and a message are two different types. So we have to convert a string to a message. And so how to do that, we're just going to do, we'll call it the Billboard text. And localizes. And then it's like a mini function. So we're going to enter, we're going to say, how about the text? We'll call it the text. And that's going to be of type string. All right. And then of type string, and it's going to give the return type of message. Oh, gosh. Message. And we're going to tell that to return, how about the, let's see here, type message. We'll just say the text. So it's returning the text we put in. So we just made a mini function here. What did I do wrong? The string. Oh! All right. My bad. Okay. So I don't know why I did that, but for a function, we gotta put the proper braces. I don't know. Brain is tripping. So that's just like our mini function, the Billboard text. It's going to take in a string and it's going to return the message of what our text is. Okay, so there's that. So now we need to tell it what to do now that we got that. So we're going to delete this print because we don't need that. That was just a placeholder to keep our stuff from erroring out. So now we're going to do, we named our billboard, up here we named our billboard Billboard 1. So let's just name it Billboard 1. And then we're going to do dot set text. That's just a built-in Fortnite function in the Billboard class. And we're going to pass in the function we made up there, the Billboard text. And then we're going to say what the Billboard text is. We're passing that into that function up there. So you pressed button 1 like that. Okay, we have no errors hopefully, but all right. So, and then to make sure it updates, we're just going to do two things. We're going to do Billboard 1 dot These are built in, so when you see the documentation, you can check out what they do, but these ones are pretty just, you just put them just 'cause. Billboard, one dot, show text. All right. So now when they press button 1, we're going to tell, it's going to take whatever player presses it, and it's going to show them you pressed button 1. And it's going to use that to update display. And since we're doing this exact same function 3 times, let's just uncomment these out. Oops. Okay. So let's uncomment those out, and we're going to copy and paste this one 3 times. And in verse, when you hit Control V, you can do Control Z so it puts it back in the right spot. We're going to change this, of course, to button 2, and this to button 2. And then we're going to paste one more time, and Control Z to get it back. And then we're going to do button 3 pressed, and then we're going to change this to button 3. All right, now we're going to save. And then we're going to go here and do build verse code again. We're going to push changes. And now when this thing runs, if we did this right, hopefully we did this right, it should. Okay, it's doing its thing now. So now when we press our buttons, we should get the message on the billboard of which button we pressed. And so now that we got 3 buttons, you'll notice if we come back to here, this repeats kind of a lot of code, right? Like, why do we need to repeat this code each time? I know for this is kind of a small example. It's not like a whole lot of code, but so basically now that we got these buttons, we could do something even better. Instead of making a button 1 pressed function, a button 2, a button 3, some nice people over at Epic discovered that this was tedious, and thankfully they posted code. I will put the link to this. So I'm going to expand it and copy and paste. They put it over in the Fortnite dev section because before this you really couldn't pass in more than one variable. So, and the only variable you could pass in was who clicked it, but there's often reasons you need more than just that. So I'm going to copy this, and if you have a regular project, you should put this in its own folder. So let me copy this. Let's see, hopefully I got it all. I'll just do this. Okay. Copy the full snippet. Now, normally you'd want to open your Verse Explorer. You'd want to right click here and do a new file, and you might name it utils.verse or something. But since this is just such a small project, I am going to make sure that I am completely out of this class here. My tutorial button device, this is going to be its own thing, and I'm going to paste it, and I got to delete some of this. Okay. So normally this thing would go on top. You'd want to put this using up with your other code. I'll just keep it here for now separate, just so you know that this was written by Epic here. So they wrote this for us to use. All right, so now that we have their code snippet here, we can go back to our code and use their code, basically. So how about instead of button 1, button 2, and button 3 pressed, I'm just going to save these. So I'm going to control copy these, and oops. paste them below and comment these out. And now instead of making 3 functions, I am going to be lazy and make 1 and call these button in. No, wait, button, I'll call X for now. You'll see why. Call it button X. Button X. Button X. And button X. Now I'm going to copy one of these. And I'm going to paste this here. And now I'm going to call this button express just like up there. But now we want to pass in 2 things. But wait, while we're here, just so we don't. Okay. So now this text here, instead of doing this, why don't we just call this, I don't know, text. We'll just be creative and call it text. All right. And then just like any other function, now we need to tell it what that text is. So we're going to comma and we're going to pass that in. So we're going to call it text the same. That's going to be of type string. Sweet. Now look at that. Oh, did I misspell it? Button X pressed. Oh, but then I got to pass it in up here. See these? So now, comma, button 1 pressed. What happened? I don't know, something's going on up there, but let me just. Silly me, I forgot to say, we need to tell it about these functions down here. I did not put everything. So, button1.interacted with .subscribe. Now we need to make this a subscribe agent. That's just what they gave us. It's not something that we can write. It's just they called it subscribe agent when we're using this thing. So sorry about that. I'm like, why isn't it working? Okay. Yeah, so now instead of just interacted with .event.subscribe, now it's subscribe agent and then button. Okay, so now we got our 3 buttons. And we commented these out, so it's going to ignore these 3. I could really delete these for all intents and purposes, but I'm just going to leave them for demonstration. So now it's going to use this function, because we commented out our interacted with event buttons. And so now it's going to use this function. So we're going to save it again. File, save. Then we're going to do build verse code. Push changes, save selected. Okay, and now when our game runs, if I didn't make a bug somewhere, it should do the exact same thing. How exciting, the exact same thing. But it is kind of just because you don't have to repeat the same code over and over. So let's test it. So if we did this right, now it should say you press button 1, you press button 2, you push button. Uh-oh, maybe I didn't. Oh, yeah, okay, so, but it does work. I just didn't put the 3 there. But that's actually a really good accidental segue into the next part. So I'm going to end this game. And we can make this code just a tiny bit better using this whole concept, right? So now, notice how here we're still repeating this you pressed button. We're still kind of repeating stuff. So why don't we go a little bit further and comment these 3 out. I'm just going to copy these again. And I'm going to paste them just for now. I'm going to comment these 3 out. Oops. Okay, so we commented those out. And now, why don't we make this so that we just pass in numbers? So check this part out real quick. We're going to get errors, but just hold out for me a second. So instead of pressing in all that text here. Why don't we just make it even better so that we just pass in these numbers when they click. It's plain old numbers like this to make it even less tedious work later if we want to add like 100 buttons or something. Well, all right, there we go. But obviously we get an error, so we do have to make another function. So I'm going to copy and paste this. Okay, and this time I'm going to call this press button X, and I'm going to call this in instead. I better change it up here as well. Okay, so now instead of button X, we're going to do button. All right, button in. Okay, so now we have this, but check this out. Now we need to change this text type to an int. Okay, so all fine and good, you're thinking, but wait, we're getting an error here, and that's because the Billboard text needs to be a string, not an int. But do not worry, because there's also a solution for that. See how up here we had the Billboard text, and we gave it a string, and we gave it a message here to text. Well, we can also, I'm just going to copy and paste this again. We can make one that does take an int. So why don't we'll just call it Billboard text. I don't know, we'll just be really creative and call it Billboard text 2 for now. And then here, the text, instead of taking in a string, let's give it an int. Okay. So now we're going to, instead of giving it a string, we'll give it an int, but we're change this to you pressed button and then a little space. So now this you press the button, the text, it'll take the int and put it into the text for us here. So now we can use this button in pressed function, and we're having it listen for that function here. So I'm going to save this, gonna build it again. All right, then I'm gonna push changes, save it. And so now if we press our buttons, oh, what happened? Let's see, so now we're just getting our int. What did we do here? Oh, I didn't tell it Billboard for text too. Okay, so string text. Is that what that is? Button to string. The whole debugging process. You press the button. I don't know. Save. Let's run it and see if I got an error. Inverse code. Huh. Oh, well that worked. Alright, so if you liked my tutorial, please subscribe and like. Also, this is my first one, so if I gave too much detail, if I didn't give enough detail, any hints, suggestions, anything, let me know in the comment section below. And also, if you like Fortnite Creative and want to play some of my maps, that'd be super awesome. Alright, thanks for watching, and I hope to make more tutorials soon.